Joining me on Impact Catalyst is Emilie Socash with Empower Creative, and we're talking about PPP, specifically for nonprofits. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad to be here, Joe.
So you've been very active with helping nonprofits with getting their PPP approved. You did that in partnership with Social Venture Partners. You've run a couple seminars. Can you catch us up with what you've done and how that's gone?
Sure. So, Social Venture Partners, I'm one of the partners and active in helping the group on this particular content area. They opted to really dig deep and serve our nonprofits in the Tampa Bay area in a hands-on way. I went ahead and led two different sessions on the PPP. One was on the opening day of when the PPP was made live on how to apply for the PPP. And we had well over 100 nonprofits in our area participate in that webinar. And then a couple weeks later, after many of these nonprofits had gotten a decision, whether they were approved or even funded. And we called that session I got the PPP, now what? And it was really a 1 hour deep dive on what to do as the next steps for fulfilling the needs of the PPP and really optimizing the chances for full forgiveness on this program.
It was great that you got out the door very early with the first one. I think there were a lot of resources out there, but I think none were as early as that seminar. So did you get a feel for what percentage of the folks who you connected with around the first seminar were able to successfully get funded? And if not, what were some of the reasons why they didn't?
Well, so we definitely had a high degree who were successful in applying. So I give them props for even getting that into the doors of their bankers. We found that the ones who were the most successful were ones that already had a banking relationship established. Now, that is it's a double-edged sword because some of our nonprofits are small or are very fiscally prudent and they haven't had to cultivate a banking relationship to any great depth. Some have a higher need and have really done some ongoing cultivation and shepherding of a relationship. And those who had a person to go to at their local bank or at one of their board members or donors banks, those were the ones that really had the best chance of being funded. The bulk of the nonprofits who applied in our area did, at least at this point, receive an approval. Banks have 10 days to actually fund after the date of approval. So we're starting to see a lot of those are coming through. And one of the things I found really interesting was that it was our small community banks who were first out the door with the technology, who were the most hands-on in working with our nonprofits and our small business community at large. And they were the ones that were the most responsive and most prepared overall.
So obviously we've heard of them running out of money. So was the money, when they ran out of money, was that based on approvals? So essentially once you're approved, you're good to go. The funding just needs to happen later?
Exactly. So that's the good thing. If a nonprofit or a small business has been approved and has an SBA loan number assigned to them, their lender has let them know you're approved. Now, some nonprofits have been put into a queue, which is a strange limbo that will be interesting to navigate through over the next week or so. Now, Joe, just before you and I signed on the call, I just got a news alert that earlier today, President Trump signed into effect the second round of PPP program funding. And so this means that we have another, some of the bankers are predicting that this could dry up in 3 days, it could be 7 days, but we have another short window in which nonprofits and small businesses at large can apply for it. Now, in this next round, one of the things that SVP is eager to, again, get out the gate in terms of educating our community on is that a portion of those dollars has been earmarked for those in the community who are in underbanked relationships. Now, that's kind of a funny term, but basically those organizations in the community who do not have a banking relationship or they are a women-owned or an underserved population is owning and running that business. And so I really like the sound of that. SVP next week will be doing, again, some education on that, particularly for our nonprofits in the community who might fall into that category.
So it sounds like it was heard that the first go around, the people who kind of got left behind potentially were the ones without the banking relationships, and this was a correction of that with this
Exactly.
new digging into the holding pattern, or that limbo you talked about. Do you have any sense if that's tied to funds availability or a next layer of checking? Do you know why they're in that space?
So, my theory is, and this is not necessarily true for every scenario, but my sense is what I'm hearing from the nonprofits is that they were put into a queue, that their materials were submitted, and then they're being basically serviced in the order that they were received.
Hmm.
Now, this is problematic for any small business owner, including our nonprofits, because there's no guarantee that with these limited funds that their request is going to make it to the top of the heap. Now, as a part of the program, an institution can only apply for one loan at a time. It would be
Hmm.
fraudulent to have multiple applications in um, to different lenders. Nobody should be doing that.
Right.
However, this is the time when our small business owners and our nonprofits can be communicating with their lenders who have put them in the waiting list and ask them, is there any chance that I'm going to make it to the top? Otherwise, I want to pull my application and go to another bank that is dedicated to serving my needs.
So then, moving on to the second seminar, for
Mhm.
the folks that have received their money, what was
Mhm.
some of the guidance you gave them after they had been funded?
Yeah. So again, we started from the perspective that that relationship with the lender really is critical to navigating this process over the next 8 weeks. And into that 60-minute session, I crammed so much information. I mean, I can speak rapidly and I can deliver a lot of content, but I found myself towards the end saying, and we'll have to cover this another time. We'll have to cover this another time, because there are so many different facets of navigating the 8 weeks of the PPP period that can be advantageous, particularly for our nonprofits at this
Hmm.
time. This is a program where you're basically you're extending the runway of this crisis situation because you're covering the cost of your employees and some of your basic overhead expenses
Hmm.
uh, for 8 weeks. And this can be a beautiful thing when applied with some diligence, with some intentionality, and having some really deep conversations and some scenario planning with your leadership. And so I gave some highlights. I've actually developed an 8 week class on my learning platform that goes week by week on what nonprofits can be doing. But in that 1 hour session, I gave some of the most critical highlights, which are getting organized, pulling together your PPP leadership team, maintaining strong communications, and really doing scenario planning, which fuels the budgeting process for an unpredictable future for all nonprofits right now.
So basically, you had so much information and so much overflow that you decided to expand that to an 8 week course. And
Yes.
is that running where you do 1 week, one session per week as you move along, or is it all meant to be consumed all at once?
So right now, for those who would enter the course right now, it will be 1 week at a time. But as enrollees sign on, they'll have access to everything that came before. So, for example, today was actually the first post date for the first week of lessons.
Mhm.
The first lesson is really focused on setting up for success, and it's talking about how to organize yourself, looking at your accounting systems, and really looking at how you're communicating with your leadership to really lay the groundwork for some down the road meaningful conversations. There's a lot of education and engagement that nonprofits can be tending to right now. Now, as my participants go forward, every Wednesday they'll get a new chunk of material, a new, this is what to focus on this week. Um, what I found when I was developing the course for SVP was that it's a little bit like drinking from the fire hose.
Mhm.
There are so many pieces of this puzzle that one can attend to. My goal with offering this 8 week class is to really offer a sense of focus and almost a sense of psychological safety, that this is what you need to be doing now, and we'll attend to these other things in a future week. And we're just going to get through this process methodically together with the goal of maximizing the forgiveness so that this loan becomes a grant. That is
Mhm.
the ideal scenario for our nonprofits.
And that's not guaranteed. And I
No.
think the initial supposition was it would be relatively easy, but You
Mhm.
don't, with the amount of money that's at stake here, you don't want to take that for granted. You want to make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's.
Exactly, exactly. And one other thing I would mention, Joe, is that I as much as I adore our nonprofit community, and I would be doing this anyway, this topic is actually really personal to me too, because my family business received PPP monies. So I am going through this process right alongside other small business owners and other nonprofit leaders in our community. And we're going to get through this together in a way that is advantageous and really fulfills the vision for the PPP program, which is funding our operations, particularly our staffing, for the next 8 weeks.
And can you let us know the website? I want to make sure we include it in a graphic along the bottom.
Sure, definitely. So you can check out all the details about what I do, including this class, at empower-creative.com.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's a lot of good info, and would encourage folks who are going through the process to make sure that they do everything. Again, make sure that to increase your chances of being able to turn that loan into a grant, which is what everybody's hoping for. So,
Exactly. Thanks for having me, Joe.
thanks a lot.